Well, things just continue to get spicy for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I know yesterday we made a primary video talking about the idea of an Elias Pettersson trade to the Montreal Canadiens, and for the most part, I'd say that fans from all over have thought about it. Many have had their opinions, whether or not it's actually a reasonable idea from one team or another's perspective. But now, we're diving into more Pettersson and Montreal talk, also talking about the LA Kings. Furthermore, we have some updates on Jake DeBrusk that could see the Vancouver Canucks net a super interesting name, that in which we actually have made another video about too. Could the Shane Wright Vancouver conversation steer itself in the direction of some sort of a Wright for DeBrusk trade? Let's dive into what David Pagnotta said on yesterday's Sekeres and Price episode. And you might remember, this is the same episode where David Pagnotta spoke about Jake DeBrusk and Brock Boeser. Whether or not Montreal, Boston could make sense. It's the same podcast hit where Pagnotta said that Jake DeBrusk is worth a first and a prospect, and that Brock Boeser is worth more than that. Oh man, I love David Pagnotta. Just go out there and feed that trade price into my bloodstream, please. But if you saw yesterday's video, you would remember that we didn't actually talk about the second part of what David Pagnotta said on Sekeres and Price. Thanks to Canucks News Summaries for going out there and summarizing the audio. But this is what David Pagnotta spoke about in regards to Elias Pettersson. 10 days ago, the word around the NHL was that maybe the Vancouver Canucks have started to soften their unwillingness to retain salary. Maybe they're willing to retain $2 to $3 million a year. The plan for Vancouver is to work with Pettersson and get him back on track, but they will still listen to teams that are asking about him. Pagnotta says he wouldn't be surprised if Montreal or LA engage with retention being a possibility. There are teams that believe he can rebuild his value, but it has to be outside of Vancouver. Now, Pettersson's making 11.6 if you retain 3. That's $8.6 million. If you're getting an Elias Pettersson who can be a 60, 70-point guy, then that's actually pretty all right for $8-point-something million a year. Add to that the defensive quality that Pettersson does provide and the intangibles, the little things. Pettersson has really started to incorporate those into his game more so than just being a raw point producer like he was over the past few years with his dangles and his snipes and his everything else. But Pagnotta is saying that he thinks the LA Kings or Montreal Canadiens could engage because Pettersson is now in a territory where the Canucks could retain salary. And that makes sense. Montreal, as we had spoken about in yesterday's video, they do need another center to play behind Nick Suzuki. Meanwhile, the LA Kings, they just lost out on Anze Kopitar, so they need somebody to come in and fill those minutes. Is Quinton Byfield prepared to be a number one center? Who knows? Who cares? Because if Elias Pettersson is also in the mix, you don't need Byfield to be that number one guy all of a sudden already. And with a team like LA that has just acquired Artemi Panarin and is likely going to be getting Kevin Fiala back for next season too, you can tell the Kings are going to be competitive, and Elias Pettersson, I'm not saying that this is like the biggest factor in it, but Pettersson going to LA seems like a really good lifestyle fit for him and his family. So that is something I think could be acknowledged. Furthermore, David Pagnotta speaks about the Vancouver Canucks taking on bad contracts. The Canucks have an internal budget that's been put in place, but it is circumstantial based on where they're at. Pagnotta thinks there is a willingness to do a little bit, but it has to come with a good asset. He mentions Brendan Gallagher and Ilya Lyubushkin, but both of these names would require sweeteners for Vancouver to take him on. Now, in regards to no trades and no move clauses, both the NHL and NHLPA seem to be comfortable with where these are at. Even though players like Brady Tkachuk and all these guys have asked for trades, provide winning environments, and less players are going to want to leave. In regards to Columbus, Pagnotta says he has been told that nothing is going on with Zach Werenski. And then here at the bottom, there's a conversation on Seattle. The Kraken, according to David Pagnotta, they have money and they want to spend it. They want to make bigger splashes. Jaden Schwartz and Eeli Tolvanen will go to free agency, although Tolvanen wants to stay. Jake DeBrusk is mentioned as a potential replacement for Jaden Schwartz and Tolvanen, and the Kraken are willing to trade Shane Wright. They've been dangling him since the middle of last season. Pagnotta believes that Wright is open to a change of scenery. There is a preference to package Wright with other assets to get an impact top-line forward, a potential young player for young player type of deal. So, yeah, maybe a Jake DeBrusk trade for Shane Wright isn't necessarily in the cards because Jake DeBrusk, I'm sorry to break it to you, this guy is not a top-line forward. I mean, he's a top-line power play producer if you just look at the 5v4 goals he's able to produce. But either way, if the Seattle Kraken have been dangling Shane Wright for the better part of a year, maybe they lower their asking price? I mean, does it have to be young player for young player? Why can't it just be young player for Jake DeBrusk? I'd say that if the Vancouver Canucks end up getting a guy like Shane Wright, he fits with the timeline of what the Canucks are trying to build. Maybe he's a little old, 22 years old, drafted 4th overall 2022 NHL Draft, but hey, if it's Wright or the 14th overall pick or some other top 15 pick in this year's draft that the Canucks can get for Jake DeBrusk, I'm okay with any of those returns. It's a lot more than I would have personally expected based off of what Jake DeBrusk has been able to provide the Vancouver Canucks over the past few years. I do find it interesting, though, that Seattle is so intent on getting all of these guys when it's like, hey, Jaden Schwartz and Eeli Tolvanen are right there. If Tolvanen wants to stay, why are you not bringing that guy back? He's a beast. Even though the Seattle Kraken have a preference to trade Wright with other assets to get a top-line player, I do still think that the Jake DeBrusk thing is more interesting than we're giving it credit for, especially when you look at the first part of Pagnotta's hit, where all of these teams have been linked to Jake DeBrusk in some way or another. The Sens, the Blue Jackets, the Canadiens, the Flyers, the Kraken. I mean, a bunch of these teams have first-round picks. If there is some sort of a bidding war, then maybe that's possible. We did hear that Jake DeBrusk, because he is on a very team-friendly contract that has term, and because he's not super old at 29 right now, there seems to be a decent amount of value for this power play scorer on the trade block, especially when you consider the lack of other available forward options at free agency. So you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. When you hear that Shane Wright is being dangled around by Seattle, does that make you interested if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan? Do you think Jake DeBrusk, one of these pieces that Seattle has been linked to, is a good enough player to send over to Seattle to make a trade like that work? What are your thoughts on Elias Pettersson and the Montreal-LA conversation? I'm saying it feels like a pretty reasonable fit personality and lifestyle-wise for Pettersson to go to LA with his wife. Maybe Montreal makes sense too, but at the end of the day, he would be acquired because they want him to be a good hockey player and they want him to get back up to 100-point potential. If that happens, then obviously good for him. What do you think the trade price should be from LA or Montreal, with or without salary retained? There are 6 more years left on the contract, so if Vancouver is willing to hold on to $2 or $3 million per year, then that obviously would be substantial. Especially if the guy gets bought out too. Like, we have mentioned this a number of times, but if Pettersson gets bought out, depending on when that buyout executes, there could be a chance that the Canucks could be left with some dead Pettersson cap until the end of the 2030s, but we don't need to talk about that right now. Thoughts in the comment section below about Pettersson to either Montreal or LA. Thoughts on Shane Wright to Vancouver for Jake DeBrusk. Does it make sense? Does it not? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.